I'm Jacqueline Gelineau, and I'm joined here today with Linda Sankey, who is the MP candidate for the NDP Party of Canada for the Similkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay riding. Now, Linda, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
What made you decide to get involved in federal politics?
It's a very big answer to the question, but the long and the short of it really is that I've been working with folks, serving people with my nonprofit society for 22 years, working folks with disabilities who've had a life-changing experience because of a brain injury or a stroke. And helping people all that time and seeing how social programs are so integral to help people continue on in their recovery journey, I wanted to make sure that the government that gets elected are going to ensure that social programs remain the way they are or enhance them rather than cutting them back. And so this was actually the impetus, and so some of my clients and some of my colleagues had encouraged me, but I'd actually spoken to our existing MP, Richard Cannings, about 2 years ago, and he hadn't quite published the intention that he was going to retire. So we were talking about it for a while, and really about the job and what the work really entails, and finding out that the skills that I have, you know, working in collaboration, pulling people together to solve problems, that's really the work. And Richard's done an excellent job with that, and he's been known to be someone that will go between party lines and pull people together and get jobs done. Well, that is what I do in my current job, so finding others locally and farther away that are working on similar projects as us and making our outcomes amplified because we're working collaboratively. So I really think that my skill set is quite connected to the work of an MP.
Mm-hmm. Your riding is quite large. It's an interesting geographically. What key issues are facing your riding in particular that maybe aren't as big of a deal federally?
Well, I think you're right, the riding is really large. It goes from Manning Park on one end to Roseland, Castlegar, Warfield on the other end, and then up as high as Chute Lake above Naramata, and everybody in between. So the majority of the communities are along the boundary area, many small communities. So rural Canada is really highly represented in this riding, and I think that's one of the things that's really missing in the large party platforms that we're hearing. Not a lot about small rural areas. And some of the interesting things that are really impacting daily lives there are like no Wi-Fi connection. So there's some people that I'm speaking to, they say, you know, phone and leave me a message because I will never be able to take your call. I don't have internet connection. These are really important things, especially around, you know, all of the climate change issues we've been having. If there's a wildfire or if there is a flood, you need to be able to know what's going on, so you have no news coming to you, but also you can't reach your neighbors who might already have heard. So these are really important, urgent and emergent things that are happening. In addition to that, we've got a really broad sector of kinds of jobs that people are doing. You know, out in the Roseland Castlegar Trail area, we've got a steel and aluminum plant out there with tech. And, you know, at the other end, we've got, you know, a mine that's mining, and forestry. We've got forestry all along the boundary. These are not always represented in big cities where the population is the highest. So our riding has that diversity, and also we're the only place in Canada where they have battery recycling. So if you think about electric vehicles, in this riding is the only place in Canada where they're actually recycled and repurposed. So but we also have agriculture and tourism as mainstays in all of these communities as well. So a really wonderful and diverse set of things that are different.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of mines and the steel plants and agriculture, your riding also goes right across the American border, who historically has been a large trading partner with us, and with the imposition of tariffs. What would you do if elected to ensure that these local economies are, you know, thriving in light of the tariffs and the disruption to our trade?
I think what we really need to is ensure that workers have consistent jobs that they can go to. And one of the most important things we can do is ensure that those big businesses, small and large, have access to Canadian trade opportunities, so across borders within Canada, but also to coordinate across the globe opportunities with other countries that are also being impacted by that neighbor to our south that's also attacking, financially attacking other countries everywhere. So there's a great opportunity for Canada right now to lock in some good international trade opportunities, get our steel and aluminum, our forestry products across the globe, but also we need to build new housing in our riding and across the country. So those products should be quickly redirected and have the opportunity for local construction companies to be able to access those goods here in Canada as a priority.
Yeah, so to the point of housing, housing affordability is a really key issue. Zoning is provincially legislated, but federally there's a lot that can be done as well. What would you do if elected to ensure your constituents have affordable housing?
Many years ago, other forms of government have reduced the amount of federal dollars going through Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which really slowed down new housing across the country. We're fortunate in British Columbia because we're one of the few provinces that have continued to do new social housing as a mainstay of what we're doing. Many other provinces across the country have not had this federal government financial support. We need to increase what Canada Mortgage and Housing is able to do financially to get new projects off the ground. We also need to provide some new infrastructure dollars to municipalities, regional districts, and other groups so we can keep our infrastructure strong, so we can have the housing where we need it. First Nations bands, which we have several of in this riding, also need access to that infrastructure. So Canada Mortgage and Housing and First Nations oriented groups need to have access to those dollars so we can have clean water on reserve, so we can have new housing. So, there's folks living on reserve where, the average number of people in a home is 7.8 people, where other folks not on reserve, the average number of people is 2.2, I think it is. So it's a significantly overcrowding situation on First Nations. We have to address those issues in housing.
So according to the most recent polling numbers, it'll likely be either a Liberal or a Conservative government that wins. What would you be able to do if elected and your party's not in power to ensure you're properly advocating for your constituents?
Well, I think you're probably right. I think we're not going to be the ones in power, and I'm happy to concede that. But what I can say is in this last 4 years, the NDP had 25 MPs out of 338. In that number, we've been able to do quite a lot. With our confidence and supply agreement, we forced the Liberal government to bring in the dental care program, the pharmacare program, which is getting free birth control to women across the country, as well as paying for diabetes medicine, which is actually reducing costs for our health care across the country. If we can keep people well, we're not going to have them going to hospital. So I can see our government or our party having a direct impact in being able to hold the other government, whichever one forms government, accountable for what it is they say they're going to do, but also influence being able to keep our very important social programs which are affecting affordability significantly if they change.
And along that same point, there's a lot of talk of risk of splitting the vote. If people are left-leaning, if they vote, say, for NDP or Green rather than for the Liberals, it could split the vote. What do you have to say to that, and what would you like to ensure voters understand?
Thanks for that question. This is the really important one in this riding. So traditionally, this riding has either been a Conservative riding or it's been an NDP riding. And for another party to win or to beat the Conservatives in this party, we would have to lose like 90% of the voters that we currently have. And my numbers are very strong right now. So the Liberals are not going to win in this riding, and what we're going to end up is a progressive split if people don't stick to the NDP. The Liberals will not beat the Conservatives in this riding just based on what we're polling now. So I really want to encourage progressive voters to recognize that we have to stick together. We did another forum just on April 9th in Penticton yesterday, and we said, you know, a lot of the similar things that are being said with progressive leaders. But to split the vote here would just give us a Conservative government, and that's actually why I'm running, to make sure that we don't have that happen. They will cancel many of our social programs, and they won't be focused on anybody but those folks that have a lot of money, that are, you know, purchasing large swaths of housing and then increasing the rental costs for people who are renting. And, you know, talking to folks, renting and affordability, cost of groceries, these are really important issues. You know, a lady I spoke to the other day, she was considering voting Conservative, and I could see she had a little child at her ankles, hanging onto her knee as we were talking at her door. And she said, you know, the thing that's making me worry is about the daycare. That, you know, the other parties are likely to not continue to support the daycare program. But how are ladies or families to get out working if you can't afford daycare? That $10 a day daycare, we need to do more on that front, but there are families that actually depend on it, and it saves them somewhere between $1,300 and $1,800 a month with each daycare placement that they have. So those are programs that affect everyone that's working.
So like we touched on earlier, your riding is large, it's expensive, and it's quite diverse. What are some key parts of your riding that you love, that keep you there and engaged in your community?
This is a really hard one to answer because I think there's so many different places that are awesome. You know, I was out in Grand Forks last week, and they've got some wonderful hiking trails out there. It's a beautiful part of our riding. But I could say that about almost every place in the riding. You know, I grew up in the Penticton area, and there's so many little places. I'm a kayaker. I love to be out on the water, you know, especially in the spring. It's so beautiful. We've got some wonderful agricultural areas that are just blooming. Everything is just really fantastic right now. But the strength of the riding that we have is really based on tourism. It's based on that agriculture. You know, it's that farm to table kind of thing that bring people here. It's the wineries that we have, the experiences that people can have in this riding that make those other big industrial jobs a place to be and live and really enjoy where we're living. So we're very blessed in this riding.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thanks so much for having me.